Hello, Nbpoli pod world. Welcome back to another week. I'm here in Mennequist in St. John, New Brunswick on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoq, and the Pasquotomakati. We are election day +4.
Or no, just since Monday. It's only Thursday.
Thursday, 3
yeah.
+3.
Yeah.
I guess when the pod goes out, that'll be +4.
Exactly.
Of course, I'm joined by my intrepid co-host, Joanna Killen.
Hello, everybody.
And we've got a chat we've been trying to have for a while now.
Well, it's our panel now, our post-election panel, which is so exciting because I know I felt a big sigh of relief this week, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that with our panelists. And Brent, I think you did too. Just that we're in a liberal minority. We always love a minority around here.
I love a minority. I also did endorse Wayne Long publicly. So I think the relief factor is public by now. And of course, we come from very different backgrounds, but today we're excited to be able to have our panel back.
Yes.
Because I think there's a good collection. The one thing we're missing, if we could have a fifth today, it would be an Acadian. Yes. An Acadian on the podcast would be a big get.
Fred LaForge.
Yeah, well, we get Fred LaForge once in a while when he stops trying to put trucks together and arrange big deals in the States to solve global hunger.
Yes, or like a Kevin Arsenault. Maybe
we get to get Kevin Arsenault back on the phone. That'd be great. Anyway, today we have a good collection of New Brunswick politicos. We are, of course, joined back with Teri McMackin. Hello, Teri.
Hello, hello.
And our good friend, Shawn Rouse.
Hello. How are you doing?
Welcome back, guys.
Nice
Love
to be
being here.
Nice to see you. Yeah.
It hasn't even been 4. Was it been 4? It's been 4 months. It's been 6 months.
6
Wow.
months.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Or somewhere around there.
The baby's 7 months actually. So
that's right. Yeah. So welcome back to the show. It's been too long, and just so people remember, Teri, you're coming to us from Petitcodiac.
Mm-hmm.
And you're coming to us as somebody who's served on municipal council. Mm-hmm. And you're coming to us as a former candidate.
Mm-hmm.
What else should we add to the resume here to round out your background? Because I think there's a whole new audience, and I don't think whole new, but I think there's a fresh audience now that the Nbpoli pod has, and I don't think everybody's going back to listen. But the election sort of picked up some numbers for us and put us on different radars. So remind us, what else is it that you're bringing to us from Petitcodiac? And then we'll go to you, Shawn.
Well, first I'll say, especially for new listeners, this is not my voice. For anybody who is watching on Rogers, you will see a pretty sweet scar across my neck. And I had my thyroid removed and my voice hasn't come back. So I'm happy to be here. I apologize if my voice drives you nuts.
No, it sounds very clear to me. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on, but I just thought you had a cold. I apologize.
No, I'll take it. I'll take it. A cold.
Yeah.
No, yes, I've served on council. I did run in the provincial election. I've been involved in politics for a while, just actively engaged. But my husband will call me a career volunteer because I sit on dozens of boards, and I've basically made a job of helping nonprofit boards get set up and do the work that they need to do. So I'm just a really active community member who happens to be a freelancer with a flexible schedule.
Well, that's awesome. But you also just told me before we come on the podcast, you mentioned that you were talking to people from St. Stephen today for your job. So, the perspective there isn't strictly related to Petitcodiac area, but you've got some sight lines on the rest of the province too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and Shawn, of course, if you're new,
you've been around for a little bit.
Shawn's been around for quite a few episodes here. So if you're that fresh that you haven't heard of Shawn Rouse yet, Shawn is a real.
There are envious people.
Political watchdog in New Brunswick. Got his eyes on a lot of different angles, and but you're not traditionally a deep partisan political.
Not usually, no. I was someone who was really, I'd say, got enamored with Blaine Higgs and his government, and really took I think, the strongest stance I've ever taken against any politician there. But otherwise, I try to stay somewhere down the middle. I think of myself as moderate, and especially on the provincial side, I really like watching the legislature and
Yeah.
the developments there. So
Yeah, we
That's-
definitely get a fair bit of tips and tricks from your angle, Shawn, with what you put out on Twitter and what you put
Yeah.
on your socials. Because I don't have the time to pay
No,
attention to
it's
some of the things,
helpful.
or just the kind of the relationships that you have. So I it leads me to my first question. I've kind of hijacked here. I apologize, everybody, but I kind of came in loaded with a couple of questions for the follow up to the federal election. We chatted a bit about it before, but I do think the four of us have a fairly unique perspective and different networks that we've
Mhm.
got. And New Brunswick's a small province. So, I mean, besides the Acadian blind spot that we try to fill out with Fred LaForge and other friends that we bring on once in a while, you know, we got very different backgrounds. You know, we have urban, you know, my social media feed was largely, I won't say largely right wing, like not every one of my friends were right wing like Polyev supporters, but I had a lot of Polyev boosters.
Mhm.
Joe, yours was quite a bit different.
Yeah, definitely more on the lines of, you know, the progressives, very sad progressives, unfortunately,
Mhm.
due to the, you know, nature of the election, but also a lot of folks who, and we've talked about, and a lot of political commentators have talked about this, who sort of gave their progressive vote to the Liberals for this particular purpose. So a lot of folks there who are sort of biting their tongue and going for Carney and hoping for the best, and, you know, but still saying he's a banker and I'm anti-capitalist and all that kind of stuff. So that's more my feed. But I guess we want to ask you about what you both have been seeing on your ends of the spectrum. Like, how have the algorithms been treating you, and your own sort of networks felt about this election outcome?
Yeah, whoever wants to go first, that's totally.
Ladies first.
All right, there.
Thanks, Shawn. I know for mine, I think it's definitely more similar to Joanna's. Like, I have a lot more left-leaning people. And when I say left, like, I'm not talking about liberal. I'm talking about left-leaning people. Liberal is just if you ask me, liberal is center.
Mhm.
It is not left.
Totally.
So I do have a lot of like very, very left friends. But what did surprise me is that I was seeing a lot of these quiet conservatives. So people I didn't realize or didn't suspect would support someone like Polyev because it's like, I know this person, I know what they believe in, I know their values, I know the type of work they do. And that disconnect was really confusing for me when I would see people who are involved in, you know, XYZ directly supporting someone who was actively against XYZ. So I saw a few of those, but I did also see those more fiscal conservatives that are like, you know what, I can't support where my party is going. So I'm going to park my vote, you know, with Carney. I'm not happy about it. And they were very clear. They are not happy about it. But they did, because they felt like it's what they had to do. The alternative was just too much.
Yeah. Interesting. Very, very cool. And would you say, like, to follow-up question before we go to Shawn, would you say, because the quiet conservatives have been mentioned, at least,
and I definitely have a few of those too, who I, in my little sister group chat that we have, we'd be like, did you know that this person was a conservative? But they were all of a sudden posting about, you know, they're going to tax our home equity, like very smart people being really worried about some future kind of liberal hellscape.
The lost liberal decade really resonated with
well,
people.
It just felt like it would be a horrible outcome for them.
But did you notice anything in the rural communities? Like, New Brunswick's an interesting bag, because as far as Atlantic Canada goes, we were the most conservative by vote count, I believe. Newfoundland came close, but I think the popular vote for the Liberals was higher in Newfoundland than it was in New Brunswick. I'd have to double check that. But certainly it was, you know, Nova Scotia wise, and certainly it was PEI. Did you notice anything in the rural kind of race around the province, or, you know, in your riding, that stuck out to you?
So my riding is Fundy Royal, and I knew in my bones Rob Moore was going to win. I didn't vote for him, and I know lots of people who didn't, but I knew that he was going to win this riding. And I find there's just so much disconnect between like the cities and the people who live rurally, because we're often ignored. Like even by politicians like Rob Moore, we see him once every couple of years when it's time to campaign, the odd ribbon cutting, but he's not here in this community. And part of me understands that the riding is big. You want to go where most of the population is, but rural people, I feel like their vote hasn't changed because their vote doesn't matter. Like they're like, grandpa voted conservative, whatever. They just keep it going because nothing has shown them that voting any other way will actually change an outcome. So that's one thing I've noticed, and I definitely those quiet conservatives. I definitely saw a lot more of those in my area. Like, I mean, of course, we had Rob Moore get voted in, but there were a lot of people that just looked at Carney as like, that guy's a conservative. Like, can no one else see this? Like, he might be wearing a red jacket, but there's, a blue T-shirt under there.
Yep.
So Shawn, over to you. What have you seen?
Just on my social feed, from that perspective, I mean, I really have been detoxing a lot, honestly, since after the provincial election.
Yeah.
I was on it for, a lot of that time. And so I check it a few times a day and I'll comment on this and that, but I've been cutting back a lot. But as you say, there was some people who surprised me at these quiet conservatives who, would say nothing at all that would, we consider unusual, and then all of a sudden they're posting a Jordan Peterson video, or they're talking about vaccine injuries. And where is this coming from? Like, wow, I never knew. But, there were some people who have harbored clearly some hard feelings about the past 10 years and the rules during the pandemic, or, they just don't agree with the carbon tax, and they don't believe that the late hour change deserves to be rewarded, and they give all the credit for that to Pierre Poilievre, and so they just decided, hey, it's time for a change. And after 10 years, it's hard to blame them. 10 years is a long time to be in power, really. There does need to be a changing of the guard there, and I hope that does happen, so we just don't get the same old crew in there. And Trudeau Part 2, I think people will turn their backs on that very quickly. So I think Carney realizes that and will make the required moves to make that happen. But yeah, there was some people who definitely, my brother never posts about politics, and he was posting some conservative stuff almost daily. So that was a surprise to me. We made an agreement at Easter we wouldn't talk about politics, just in case someone was gonna get their back up. So we said, let's just not go there, and we'll enjoy seeing each other.
Yes.
So yeah, you can't say they weren't effective then in a lot of ways to sort of help bring some of these people up to the social media surface, because it's not. You're right. Like, you kind of cancel that at Easter to talk, but you're okay with it in the social media sphere. So
I remember when I was a kid, Teri, Robert Corbett, who used to be he used to be the Rob Moore when I was a teenager, showed up at the Cornhill Hall for the Strawberry Festival that the WI, the Women's Institute, had put on. Yeah. And that was a big deal. Like, my grandmother's like, Robert Corbett is coming. And,
oh my gosh!
This guy strolls up in his three-piece suit, and it was like the first celebrity I'd met at that age. He was, who is this guy? Why is everyone oohing and ahhing about him? But as you say, it doesn't seem like people do that out in the rural areas anymore. They don't make that effort to stop in at the halls and shake the hands. Like,
maybe the potholes are just too bad for them to get out there. That's my theory. But I've got a question for Brent and Joanna. Have you guys ever compared your news feeds, like what comes up for you, what comes up for that? Because I have with my husband, who is a 36-year-old white man, and the stuff that shows up for him and the stuff that shows up for me, it's wild. They look at him, they're like, "You're a conservative, clearly." He's like, "No."
Wow, you're bald, you got a beard. You must be a conservative. You must drive a truck and lift kit and everything else on you.
It's funny though you say that, because I know on TikTok 100% for sure. And probably on the others too, that like, cause when I can in the night, basically, because we're
Yeah.
up at all insane hours and then
Yeah.
you're just scrolling and
Yeah.
trying to go back to sleep or whatever. And it's like, I'm hearing like a lot of like, you know, motivational man speakers and like, stuff about, of course, like the tools and the like the actual sort of hobbies and things that I think you do actually look up.
Sure.
But it does seem like you get a lot more of like somebody telling you something very directly about, you know, something else to
Do
do
you
with.
really want to solve this problem?
Yeah.
Boy, do I have a deal for you.
I
Check
know.
out my 5 points on that.
And
Buy my
mine was
book.
a lot more like, get ready with me and, you know, let's talk about this like true crime thing or like, you know, still again, like hobbies, interests, but
Yeah.
way more sort of long form.
Every fourth SWAT for Joe is an AOC video. Of
Yeah.
Bernie
Yeah.
Sanders.
Definitely. That's interesting that you say that, Teri. I think it's 100%.
Polls tell us that men, you know, over 50 years of age sided with Carney, and men under the age of 50 sided with Polyev, like pretty large split. But it says that, but the split wasn't inordinate like it was for women. For women, it was just like, that guy creeps us out, gives us red flags. We're done with him. We ain't voting for him. Don't like the way he talks. Don't like the way he looks. Like women were ick factored by Pierre Poilievre in a way that I haven't seen a Canadian politician. Like even Stephen Harper wasn't ick factored that bad.
Mhm.
And so I noticed, like for me, like the quiet conservative comment that you point out was pretty staggering. Like I kept hearing it. So I probably heard the word quiet conservative struck me as an oxymoron the first time I heard it, because I'm like, conservatives ain't quiet, right? Like I've been living in a Blaine Higgs world here, and
Mhm.
conservatives aren't quiet. The ones that are quiet are the ones that are like Dorothy Shepherd and the rebels under Higgs, who are like, this is just finally the bridge too far, and now we're out.
Yeah.
And they go out with a very like, you know, demure sort of vibe. They don't go out.
It's almost like they have integrity.
Almost. Almost. And so at first I was like, what the heck? Like, who would be a quiet conservative? Most of these people, like the conservatives I'm used to, are the conservatives that you can tell they have been consuming like propaganda styled media for quite a while before they finally showed up and started posting about QAnon, right? Or they finally started like posting about the election being stolen. I just got a text while we're talking. This is surprising, by a person when I used to be a youth minister in Port Perry, Ontario. I posted this like really spicy take on Poilievre losing his seat today. I haven't heard from this woman in 7 years, and actually 9 years. I haven't heard from this. No, yeah, 7 years. Sorry. And so her writing did go conservative. I haven't heard from them. I posted this spicy take, and all of a sudden she's showing up in my stories saying the election was absolutely interfered with. Now, this is post-election, but during the election, there was all kinds of stuff like that. And I'm like, who are you? Like, I'm getting messages from people responding to my stuff, and I'm like, I haven't heard from you in years. And it's just like, the thing you're going to come at me with is the fact that Mark Carney is a Chinese communist plant that's here to sell the country out for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm trying to make sense of the like cognitive gymnastics that need to go on. To,
But
like,
you can't make
those...
sense of it. You can't.
No.
It's impossible.
It's all emotion to your
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people woke up, like these sleepy
I
conservatives.
see. Yeah.
They did. They came along, and then all of a sudden they showed up at the polls. Like they scored their upper end. Like the people want to knock the polls right now, but at the end of the day, the margin of error was perfect. Like they were off by 2 points.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet the conservatives got the upper end of that margin of error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they actually lost in this whole proportional representation thing for once.
Yeah.
Yes.
Third parties is it.
Yeah.
So third parties is the next question. Are they eliminated? Are we less tribal now? Are we more tribal now?
More tribal.
Like, are we answered? But no, this idea that, you know, you've seen the collapse of the NDP. The Green Party are now almost a rounding error. And in 2019, the Green Party in New Brunswick, at least, when it voted in Jenica Atwin, was scoring plus 12, 15% in all the ridings, almost all the ridings. I think there was like 2 ridings where the Greens didn't hit at least like a 10% mark. And so it was high time. There was breakthrough poised. There was, Elizabeth May was talking about moving on the leadership and all that. And the NDP now are not party status. I mean, the NDP have never been considering like a big factor out here. They usually get around 8 to 10% of the popular vote. But like, where are we at with third parties? And maybe we'll start with Shawn this time and go to you, Teri. But like, what are you? And so there's a 2-part question. What did you see with regard to third parties in that conversation with people? And then how do they rebuild, or do they?
No, that's a good question. This is something and one of these anonymous people that I hardly ever talk to online, I did actually go back and forth with them on this question a little bit. And not exactly what you asked, but it's, they said, Carney only won because of Trump, and all the NDP and Green and Bloc support went to Carney because of Trump. And it's like, yeah, sure, but why? Why didn't that support go to Polyev and instead of Carney? It clearly went to one of the top 2 parties. Why did they choose Carney over Polyev? And he said, well, they would never vote conservative. And most NDP and Green people I know would rather eat a bug than vote for the Liberals. So what do you think they did? Like, really think about it. And it's because of this Trump playbook that Polyev has used for the past several, I say several, at least, going back to the convoy and setting that fringe. And people saw it, and I think people wanted to get rid of the carbon tax. They want to move on from Trudeau. Trudeau was a leader during a very divisive time. People had, wanted a new leadership. They wanted a new change. And so I think that's why we saw those levels of conservative support go up. I think the conservatives thought that meant that their Trump playbook was working, and they just kept going and doubling down and tripling down and so on. We saw that here in New Brunswick, even with these consultants that Jenny Burns sent down to help out Blaine Higgs. Same kind of philosophy.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but because you bring it up, Shawn, and we'll go back to you on this, but like, did everybody see John Williamson's rage post about vegan ice cream?
Oh my God, that was the funniest thing
I've seen. By the way, it's delicious. I'm lactose intolerant. I can't eat the normal stuff.
But it's like, is he eating it? Plant all around it.
Right.
That guy hasn't said anything that like conspiratorial in his entire sitting. And I just, you were the one who pointed it out to me, Joe, and I was like, what in the actual is going on with the story? Anyway.
I know,
no, exactly.
With him now,
so,
it's like
he's the Lord of your
Lord
ward.
of my ward. He's the Lord of my ward now. So, don't it's not the Lord's.
Yeah.
But yes, sorry.
No, you're not talking about him. I'm talking about him. John, I'm not. Anyway.
No, you're right though. I think they got into that bubble. And here, let me just share some.
Oh yeah, I'm coming over here. Let me see your screen.
Oh, there it is.
See it?
Add to stage.
So this is a narrative poll that. Let me just shrink it down a little bit. This is narrative poll that.
No, I'll move it. I'm moving my screen around here. Sorry, Shawn.
Okay. So if you can see, what the federal in Atlantic Canada, I think most people realize was a vote-rich area for the Liberals all along in this federal election. So 65% support. This was mid-April. Yep. So before the debates, but it didn't shift very much. And then 26% for the Conservatives. And then you see really just this huge drop off of support for the third parties. So I think we consistently saw that through the election. And then what's the top issues on these polls? They say, what are your top 3 issues? So cost of living, definitely. I think Carney had addressed that probably to people's satisfaction. He certainly made it sound like he understood. Definitely the strongest on the trade question and tariffs, in my view. I think Polyev didn't talk about that nearly enough.
No, he was forced to write a couple Facebook posts saying he didn't really like Trump that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't feel sincere or like there was any meat behind what he.
No, your observation, Shawn, on that, is really, I think, bang on. Like, they were taking numbers when they were sounding like Trump in the fall and in the summer and in the spring last year, but they, like, the goalposts shifted so fast.
I think they really thought this is resonating with people. We're popular. Like it's like the chess club is popular. Let's talk about rooks and knights with everybody. It's like let's keep going. Let's really we're just, and if you see you hear people like Fatine Grasseshi talking about this conservative wave that's washing over North America. I think they really believe that. I think they really thought this Republican wave that happened in the States. I think we're seeing a lot of voter regret there now when we're seeing the actual policies come through. If that election ran again, I don't know if they'd get the same results as last time. But they really believe that we're the popular kid for once. Let's keep what we're doing is working. What we're talking about is resonating with people. But if you look at these top issues and then go down here, you look at which party, according to this poll, addressed those issues. You can see where people's heads were at. They just on addressing cost of living and then dealing with President Trump and improving health care. The NDP was much higher than the Conservatives on health care, and the Liberals
In
were
the
number
economy,
one.
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So they just weren't credible with the voters when it came to these issues for whatever reason. And is it because I think people have said, we see this playbook, we're living it in real time every day with this nightmare that's happening south of the border and all the potential economic impacts that are coming our way. We need to, if we're an NDP or Green Party voter, we need to park our vote with the grown-up that's not a mini Trump.
So you see, so I'm with you here, Shawn. I'm just gonna take off your screen. Thanks for sharing that with us. And so when it comes to third party, just before we switch to Teri, like, do you see a pathway back for third parties?
Because obviously we're not very confident in them, given that chart you just showed us.
Yeah,
my God.
Yeah. There's some missing links and there's some failed stats on some of that, but like, for the third parties. But do you think they can come back, and how might they do that?
Did you see that viral video that was going around during the election where it was put out by Juicebox or Juice.com? It's hilarious. If you haven't seen it, I'll share it with you. But they said Canadians are going to indulge in their favorite pastime, strategic voting, during this election, which was just, I laughed out loud when the actor said it because it's so true. I think this time they said, we can't afford to let Trump win. We can't afford to bring on somebody who has used the same playbook. We recognize it. We know what it is. We don't believe that they're putting us first. We figure that there is a policy that's more credible out there to us. And those traditional third-party voters park their vote with the Liberals to prevent Polyev from gaining power. So I would say, long story short, long way to answer your question, but I would say as long as there is a Trumpist or very conservative or very right-wing person out there who is somebody that voters associate with Trump, that voters will continue to keep them on the sidelines, especially while we're being punished by these tariffs and economic warfare, basically, from below the border.
Yeah. What about you, Teri? Like, do we see a pathway for third parties here, or are we like markedly in a two-party system here?
I firmly believe with every bone in my body, if Mark Carney does not implement electoral reform, whether that's ranked ballots, proportional representation, that we will not see third parties anymore. And
Wow.
I say that, and I really, really do believe it. I say that because on the lefter side of the spectrum, we tend to believe more in democracies and rights and, representation and our voices. So we feel comfortable having multiple left style parties because we feel there is room for that. But when you look at the conservatives, they're a clump of everything on the right wing. Like, you're seeing such a range within the Conservative Party that it is impossible for any leader to appease that whole group, because you have people so far as women should die in childbirth because we don't want to give them access to abortions, or, trans kids are ruining everything, to I just feel like we should be really responsible with money. Like, you have such a range that it's impossible. But the only way they can possibly form a government is if they at least kind of agree on something with the masses to do that. But if we had some kind of proportional system, people could feel confident voting for what actually matters to them. And yes, if we had proportional representation, yeah, there'd be a handful of PPC people. There might be the Animal Rights Party. There might be a Communist Party person, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's so many of us that, yeah, they should have a say. If there's enough people that believe in that one thing, even if I firmly disagree with it, give them their 1 to whatever seats and let the conversation be moderated by the group of people so that we can come up with a decision that is more aligned with what the majority of people actually want. So I will, with a lot of shame, admit that I voted strategically this time, and I hate it, and I'm angry about it. I'm angry that I was put in a position that I had to go against my values and what I believed, because the alternative was just so awful. And under the alternative, I guess this is my logic, right? Is under the Liberals, I do not believe there's going to be change. I really have very little hope that anything is going to get much better. But my hope is that it buys us a bit more time to fight for things to get better. Whereas a conservative government, if they were to win, I would feel like that's defeat. There's no coming back. The systems in place that would let me keep fighting for the things that I believe in and pushing the causes that I care about may not exist under a conservative government.
And I think that observation is very convincing to me, because, the idea of third parties are dead without PR, because where are third parties dead? They're dead in the United States. And they're dead now more than they've ever been dead in their lifetime. Like, people forget, the United States did have third parties. They did have a libertarian wing. They did have federalists. They did have the farmers' populist movement. Like, populism as a movement came out of a farmers' meeting in Alabama. Like, that party hijacked the Republican Party eventually with its.
It's almost like we missed our boat. Like, the folks that got PR did it 100 years ago. It was not, within, it was never within the last, the 1900s or the later half of it.
Yeah. It happened in 2015.
Yeah, exactly.
It should have happened.
It would be a lovely gift, Prime Minister Carney, if you're listening. I think it could save the country. Like, I might sound dramatic, but I think it could save the country. This one change, because then those people that are on the fringes, at the very least, feel like they have an opportunity to put their vote somewhere that represents them. And maybe it's not a loud voice, but it's a voice, because right now you have people who are conservative and who are on the far right that feel like they're completely silenced. And the cynic in me is like, yeah, go back under your rock. But the human in me is like, you're probably hurting. You've probably experienced things that I don't understand. So they need a space too. Just not one that controls me. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The space that needs to be carved out there, I think, is a great point. And your point earlier about, the rural voter just voting conservative because what does it matter? Those two things are really linked. If there was a space for people to sort of divide up what those conservative ideals are, it'd be amazing. You've always said the conservatives have a big tent.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that be willing to go over there. I mean, they're the underdog.
Yeah.
They're the old boy in the old country club. They're also the young guy who just wants to get out and hunt with his dog and be left alone. Like,
It's wild.
they're,
Well-
you know, you talk about this diversity of somebody who's a Christian nationalist, Teri, to somebody who's like, I just think we should be better with money. Like, that is a crazy range. Like, liberals have a range too, but they vacillate, right? They're very different.
Yeah.
But did you guys see the collapse of the PPC party?
Yeah.
And you know why? Because they found a home in conservatives.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no need for a PPC party because they fit right in with the conservatives. And did you see that April Fool's joke with Max and Bernier? Joanna's
that
like,
sounds vaguely familiar.
I didn't see it.
so, oh my gosh. So Mad Max basically made a post like, hey, I'm joining the conservatives for it was April Fool's, you know, whatever. And everyone's just like, yeah, about time. And this makes sense. And then he got so mad. He's like, I would never do that. I'm amazed that you all believed I would do that. So funny. Go look it up. April Fool's, Max Bernier got destroyed. It was great.
Oh, okay. Definitely gonna have
I know. We were actually wondering about what I didn't see anything about Dominic
No.
Carney's election result.
Yeah, where's the Canada Futures Party? Poor Tom Hardy. Like,
Oh,
He
there
didn't
wasn't
do
an
great, but I think
I'll
he
have to send it
realized
to
that
you.
going in.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Sorry,
was
go
an
ahead.
interview where they talked to him. It was a CBC interview where they
Okay.
actually interviewed the leaders of very small parties. He was one, and then there was the animal protection one, and then the communist one, and the marijuana one.
Well,
There's
what
no
more do you
libertarian.
want from marijuana?
I don't know. It was very interesting.
but okay, so
Sorry.
I got to get your thoughts on third parties.
Well, it's the tribalism thing. I think we're headed towards tribalism. When you look at an election result like that, it was the U.S. election just in the other direction.
Yeah.
And my dad's now commenting on stuff on the internet, which I love. And he actually showed up to our election party, which was
Yeah, I don't know where.
through the email. He didn't tell me he was
Oh,
coming.
I'm
He
sorry.
just,
Former
I missed
MLA Carl Killen showed up to 1 Wright Street
That
here in
would've
St.
been good.
John.
he
and
usually tells me when he's
yeah, he usually gives us a heads up. Nope, he was here and he was loving it.
No, and so he was commenting on, and he's talked to me about this too, where when you see something like that and you see like the umbrella get as big for the liberal side of things, like the other side, like you really are looking at an American style politics. Like it's here, it's arrived, and it's scary. It's scary. Like, you know, they make the kid like make fun of Jill Stein, what's her name, down the States, who's
Yeah.
Jill Stein,
leader of the
Party
Greens.
leader.
And are you not getting that same vibe about Elizabeth May, the way they're
Oh, yeah.
just roasting her in the media and teasing her? And hey, this is her 5th rodeo.
Yeah, that's the thing with
Um,
Elizabeth May. I
yeah.
will say, like, I listened to David Cochran.
Resilience?
I listened to David Cochran today, and on Power and Politics, and I mean, like Elizabeth May was incredibly like gracious to David, but David was incredibly poisonous to her. Like not a wow, Miss May. You know, it's almost unheard of that somebody gets 5 terms
Yeah.
in parliamentary system, but you've broken the mold and leading a party at the same time. What's that like? It was more like, Miss May, is the Green Party even relevant? Should we be talking to you today or not? You know, like,
And so there you go.
it's
Like it's turning into a
Rude.
US
absolutely.
light.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. And so this is the gift Carney would give. And I think to Terry's point again, it would change the country because
PR.
it would take us in
Yeah.
an entirely different direction than we are right now, which is
And the
going
conservatives would be rewarded for it. That's the
They
bizarre part.
would.
Is like
Yes.
if you look at it from a strategic positioning, that issue would have improved the result for the conservatives.
Mhm.
So they're secure on that flank because they'll always be able to respond to any criticism that the conservatives get to a PR to say, well, if we had PR there, Conservative Party, you would have more seats in Parliament, wouldn't you? And like, so, you know, who's going to be the first past the post offender? And then if you say, look, we're going to improve democracy and we're going to solve 3 economic problems in 3 years. Like if Carney positions that, I don't know how you lose. Like, I don't know how you don't emerge as like a real, like considerate.
Here's a question. So we have
Okay.
160. We have a minority liberal parliament right now. They have 168 seats. It was 169.
Oh, they just
Flip
lost
today in a recount. That's right. So
Yeah.
and flip to the block. So they are dependent on other parties now to stay alive, basically, against the Conservatives. The Conservatives are salivating over the idea of running this again because they think they'll win.
And they got the money.
And they might be right. They definitely have a lot of money. I don't know where it's all coming from, but they definitely have a lot of money. So one of the things Elizabeth May said today in the news was one of her conditions of support of the Liberal government is the implementation of a proportional representation system.
Yeah.
And
The
if she
NDP have to do that too.
Absolutely.
They have to.
So if they bring along enough people to and say, look, we'll support you, we'll keep you in power, but in 4 years we want a PR election. Is that something, do you think that would be effective? Or
I think so. I mean, nobody's talking about it, but the thing is like PR is one of those issues that if you look at the scope of work that is before the Canadian government, between unmooring ourselves from the American economy, which is 100 years, 150 years of reality, like that's an insane task. Like, I don't care how many bureaucrats there are. Like, you just don't have enough people to get enough analysis, to get enough policy change to do that work in 4 years. It's just insane. But if you imagine that being their obsession, and then kind of tossing this extra domestic thing to say, and we're going to spend the next 2 years building out and changing over a first past the post system to PR. Like, all of a sudden, the NDP would be rewarded for PR. The Conservatives would be rewarded for PR. So how does that not gain you sort of the respect in Parliament to be able to eke out that 36-month, because right now most people think minority government's not going to last 2 years. And that's just because they're looking at it historically. That's what they tend to last, or less, 2 years or less. So you gotta imagine, like, the Liberal wheelhouse should be thinking, how do we turn 24 months into 36? Because if you can get to 36, then maybe you can stretch to 40, right? You're not going to get to 48 months. You're not going to get to 4 years. But if you all of a sudden put PR on the table and say, okay, year one, we're doing this, year two, between year 2 and 3, we're doing this. And they bring down the government before it's done, before PR is stood up and appropriately, established in Elections Canada. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I did find it interesting with Elections Canada. Like, they are not as advanced as Elections New Brunswick.
not even close.
No, like, I had to come and find a bill in my house because my driver's license address doesn't match where I am at. But when I voted in the provincial election, they just looked me up and they're like, oh yeah, we can see you in here and we can see this, that, something else, and your voting record. And I didn't have to go home. Like, I was able to stay there. They was all digital. They had tabulator machines. It was all like, and your dad, who's a returning officer, has commented on Elections New Brunswick.
Yeah.
But like, Elections New Brunswick is going to need 2 years to change over a system.
Or Elections Canada.
Sorry, Elections Canada, yeah.
I mean, real talk, I think there's a big challenge implementing PR because people do not understand it.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of models of proportional representation or mixed member or ranked ballot and all sorts of different systems used all over the world. There's open list ballots where they vote for the party and for the person. Then there's closed where you can only vote for the person. So there's all these different models used everywhere, all over the world, and trying to explain, pick one, zero in on it, and explain it to people so they understand. Here's what's changing, and here's why we have to change. Because I think most people don't care, honestly. I think
true.
It's like, this kind of turned out the way I thought it was going to. I didn't really care one way or the other about how I voted. I voted the same way it's always been. Most people walk away from an election thinking, thank God it's over. The signs are down. The news will go back to normal. I don't have to listen to all these Facebook posts and all this other stuff that's been clogging up my feeds. I can just go back to my life and ignore it. Whereas there's usually a groundswell from third parties and from the, justifiably, I'm not discounting the point at all. It's just You hear this for about a week or two after the election, then it will fade away, and people don't talk about it again. And
I guess I agree with you, Shawn, on that. And
Yeah, I was hopeful with some folks I saw that were getting riled up about it, but I think you're right, Shawn. Like after a week or two, their reposts of the Fair Voting Canada site will see.
oh yeah, Fair Vote
Yeah.
Canada is going to like dive in the Google search
I know.
analytics here in the next 2 days. However, politically, like you're defining a good what do the political scientists call it? A cleavage.
All right.
A cleavage in the political like demographics. Most people don't care about PR and they don't understand it. However, most politicians have encountered it at some point in time. And it's a difficult narrative to blunt. If you imagine Carney trying, because he seems to be obsessed with trying to get the international stuff figured out. Like he's like, this is why I was built. This is why I went to school. This is why I got the 3 jobs I got. This is why I've been hired for the 3 jobs that, no one else got in the world. And now this is why I'm here for prime minister, because I'm the best. Conservatives would call him a globalist and use that against him. But I'm the best, coherent, capable, knowledgeable person with a CV to back it up to solve the international stuff. He is going to have a hard time with domestic politics, right? Like he's just, it's not his wheelhouse, right? It's Poilievre's wheelhouse. Poilievre figured out the domestic politics piece. That's why he got the best result the Conservatives have ever gotten. And again, you put him up against Carney in the situation with the urgent crisis. It's like that's Carney's wheelhouse. So yes, push come to shove, Carney won, but that international crisis may not be on the board next time. And how is Carney going to respond to the domestic realities? You throw in PR as a reality, all of a sudden it chews up a lot of airtime. And how are the NDP going to vote that down? How are the Quebecois going to vote that down? Or how are the Conservatives even going to vote it down? You're right. Nobody's going to care about it in the electorate. However, the politicians in Ottawa are going to have a difficult time saying, and we're going to the polls next week because we're not voting for PR, right? I feel like that's a hard sell, but anyway.
It really is. I think most people, well, maybe people feel like there's need for change. People who are feeling disenfranchised. I think, we saw people, even in the New Brunswick election, there was a lot of people who voted Blaine Higgs out to park their votes with the Liberals this time. Would that have, I guess, what's the strategy if you're to communicate? You're voting for half of the people you vote for are going to be a party, the other half are going to be the people, and then we're going to put them all together, and then we're going to see who has the most people, and that's how we're going to have a government now. And people are going to be, this sounds complicated. I used to just vote for one person or the top of a ticket or for my guy that I know and who I agreed with the most policies on. So I think there is an argument they're going to have to make to the electorate. Yeah. And I think it's on the third parties to lead the way. If they're, they want to hold Carney hostage, basically, saying we want PR or we're not supporting your government, then you guys need to lead the way on this kind of reform movement and make the argument to the Canadian people as to why this is a better system for them.
Well, have any of you read Too Dumb for Democracy by David Mosgrove?
No.
But it sounds, I like it already.
It is such a good, I think it should be a required read in grade 12 because it basically explains why we are dumb. He uses the word dumb. That's a sensationalized headline. But, and I mean, I've said the line a million times. How are you expected to read a platform when you don't even have enough time at the end of the day to read your kids a story? When you're working 5 different jobs, like we are not in an environment that allows us to fully understand the complexities of our democracy. And if we can't understand the complexities, we can't understand the value of it. And you're absolutely right, Brent, that it's a tough sell, but I don't think it's a tough sell for the reason you think it is. I think it's a tough sell because implementing a system like that requires integrity. And I feel like the politicians that we're electing do not have, for the most part, integrity when it comes to actually standing up for things that might not directly benefit them. We need our politicians to be the leaders, and they're not right now.
Yeah, they have integrity on some fronts, right? Like I hear what you're saying, and at first when you say that, I'm like, ooh, I don't know. There's some politicians out there that are doing a good job, but then I also think to myself, yeah, you're right. But they're like, I saw. So we're gonna have
Doing
a
good job within a system, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is what I was gonna say. To your point, we're gonna have a guest on the podcast next week. I think next week or the week after. Not Nick, sorry, Trevor Daly. He's a TikToker. He's got a few 100,000 followers. He kind of got pretty mainstream along the TikTok Canadian Poli hashtags. And I'm on there, hashtags, sorry. But I'm on TikTok following that. So I do see it. And he got pretty famous. And he said, during this election, everybody was he showed a booth and it's like two people with just like a lemonade stand. And one sign says politics or political parties, I think. Yeah, like political parties. The other one said political philosophy. And he talks about Charles Taylor, and I'm desperate to pick his brain about this. But he talks about this idea that most people just, are not interested in the political philosophy table. Everybody's in the lineup for political parties. And to be on a winning side, and
because it simplifies the philosophy.
Yeah, but it's easier to grab, it's easier to digest, and you can kind of make up your mind in 20 minutes, and then consume all that side's endless content, and throw it up on media. And it is difficult. So you got to imagine that the role for third parties. So I want to ask somebody the question, like, how do we come back? How do third parties come back? Because I don't think we've yet actually defined it. But if third parties can come back, what does it look like in a world where our attention spans are so hijacked through necessity and also through design, for a third party to break through and say, like, because I think the Democrats have this problem in the States right now. Like,
every system where it's not forced upon the electorate or accepted already is going to have a hard time with this. We're seeing all kinds of.
Australia accepted PR in 1911. Like, I don't think the people there were more like they had a higher propensity for understanding. I think it just happened
because out of necessity.
Right.
But right now we're seeing polarization across many countries, and we're seeing, the funneling of ideas towards people across our globe in a way that's never been seen before. So I really, it's worrisome that, the dumbing down is happening, the erosion of people's attention spans and ability to comprehend things is eroding so much that we are just literally careening towards two-party systems if it's not already implemented.
So here's a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
No.
So here's a question, and this is what everyone's talking about this week. Should Polyev stay, or is his brand too poisoned and too associated with Trump? And I think this relates to what you're asking. Well, people always vote strategically to keep Polyev out just because they feel like they have seen, when people tell you who they are, believe them kind of thing with Polyev. Right. We know what he's about. We see this, this whole Trumpism thing. We see all of the populist support in the West, which we don't identify with. It doesn't resonate with us. So will the third parties come back while Polyev is still there? Or does the Conservative Party need to renew itself into more of a progressive Conservative Party like it used to? I know that risks splitting off the Reform wing again, or the PPC wing, but at the end of the day, will they, is there a place for third parties while people still think they're, the things, the ideals that they cherish on the moderate or left of the spectrum are under threat?
So on that though, kind of an answer, because it's back to PR, is that when we're talking about this, obviously repetition, you're right, our attention spans are basically zero. But I think part of that message is letting people know that PR isn't just a left-wing thing. right? Like people hear PR and a lot of it is coming from progressives and
Yeah.
left-wing people. But I think that message, again, this is not because I want more right-wing, but it is the fair thing, that proportional representation will ensure that you, as someone who thinks, whatever far right, may actually elect someone, even one person, with that ideology, because there are a lot of far right people within the Conservative Party that would still say that Polyev is not going far enough, right? So I feel like
Absolutely.
changing that message to say that this actually benefits you as well. And I don't know how to get conservatives to grab onto that in the same way progressives do. And maybe that's part of the challenge, but I think that needs to be part of the message. But to really answer the question, I think as long as Polyev is there, the left is going to kind of huddle together because the alternative is just so bad.
Yeah.
Like there's so much to lose, but you can only hold people against their values for so long. Something will break.
I have two answers, and I'll try to keep them brief because we're kind of coming close to time, and I want to hear.
We have 2.5.
I want to hear your response to it, Shawn. I want to hear
We
yours,
have
Joe.
2.5 minutes.
So I'm going to be a minute. If the desire, so the question is the desire for change going to drive us? Sorry, this is not your question, of course, Shawn. Your question is Polyev going to step down, or should he step down? Can they ever win with Polyev? And this is what I said. Okay, peel back the onion layer a little bit. Is the desire for change going to drive us to third parties? And is that what conservatives want? Or will conservatives change? Or Polyev change? I think I heard the answer today when I was listening on Front Burner to Corey Tonight say, look, we are not going to win this way. If you want to try to, push the left into a small category because you are going to embody the fullest extent of the Death Star of the conservative wing of things, as Polyev has, if you're going to be that sort of combustible thing, you can expect the left to unite under the liberals, and you're going to lose more elections you're going to win. So we need third parties to come back. And I expect that conservatives will not change, but dial back the rhetoric so the NDP can find a foothold.
Okay.
But I think it would look good on Polyev if he put on some serious contrition pants. So anyway.
I don't think he has the credibility, honestly.
I don't think he does either, but I also know the electorate just loses their attention span in 5 minutes. And if he puts on contrition pants today, in 6 months, people will believe he always had.
Well, people were satiated with his. I don't think Trump's the guy, without looking at everything else that's evidence of him thinking the opposite of that. So like there was lots of people hanging that in the window, and I think they will do that. But
100%, yeah. That's
so
the thing.
I feel bad for the poor person who he'll have to boot out of their riding to do a by-election.
Yep. What do you think, Shawn?
No, I think people will repeat the same election again if we ran it again. The left to center moderate voters will all cluster together to keep out people who they would perceive as being more populist and far right, further than they are. They're not like the Doug Fords or the
Demusins.
Yeah, exactly. There are people who are way to ways they're the Reform Party. And do you want a Reform Party government? They really doubled down because they thought it was working. They thought that message was giving them a 25-point lead, and they were ecstatic about it. They were like, finally, there's a way, people are getting us, people like what we're saying, finally. It's like, no, they kind of just wanted to get rid of Trudeau and lower some taxes. So it's not really, that's not really what happened. So that's my view anyways.
Well, I mean, it's a good spot to leave off. There is so much more for us to chat about, though, to be honest. Like, I've got 3 things written down here we didn't get to. But Rogers cuts us off after an hour.
Yeah.
It was a great chat, everybody.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. We will circle back to this in a few weeks' time because there's a lot of moving goalposts right now, and God only knows who's going to score where. So maybe the Leafs will score tonight.
Maybe the Leafs will score tonight. There we go.
I just feel bad for those long-suffering Leaf fans. Give them a win.
My husband, I'll send him your sympathies.
Best wishes.
Exactly.
Thoughts and prayers.
Guys.
Just send him his thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll see you in a few weeks because we're going to come back to this for sure.
Great. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Thanks.